So, hello and welcome to the third day of daily answer writing and mentorship program for history optional. Today's topic is from prehistory, specifically about Neolithic Revolution. So, this topic is a very used topic. UPSC has asked about it quite a few times in every coaching, every textbook. We read about it. Still, it is a very important topic, and not only important, it has multiple aspects which we rarely get to see, which could be very useful in such type of questions. Let me first give you an overall idea of what all type of questions can be asked or have been asked by UPSC so far on Neolithic era in history optional, specifically history optional. These are three broad themes that emerge here. The first theme is about origin of farming or origin of domestication of plants, especially, and then animals. Why it happened, what are the theories, where it happened, etc. But this topic is relatively less important because it becomes more theoretical than applied in case of Indian prehistory. The associated or allied topic with this is about spread of agriculture. We know that it did not begin only at one place in West Asia. The old theories of diffusionism are now discarded, and it had multiple focal points across the world, at least 6-7 regions where it started with different plants and different animals. So that is one debate. A lot of views are there. This topic is well covered in our textbook of Upinder Singh, but I find this topic to be too arcane to be asked in history optional. It could be asked very well in anthropology, for example. The second topic that we have asked this time is the nature of Neolithic phase. Should it be called revolution or not? This term revolution is given by, we know, V. Gordon Childe in 1930s, 36 to be exact. And what are the reasons for and against it? That is the question. The consequences of Neolithic era or consequences of agricultural revolution, that is the topic about. And the third topic, which is associated again with Neolithic era, is about distribution of sites and regional variation, the regional pattern that emerges in India specifically. The first two questions, this one and this one, they are not necessarily about India. They are generic topics. But the third question is about regional sites variation in south, east, and north and west. Not all across Indian subcontinent we see the transition from hunter-gatherer to producer stage happening simultaneously. In South India, it happened hundreds of years or thousands of years much later than North. And in the East India, the story is quite complicated. So we have these three main themes. To the question that we have chosen today is of the second theme. Coming back to the question now. What are the features of Neolithic period? Will you consider it a revolution? It is a very simple question. We know the person who gave this term, his name was V. Gordon Childe. Let me tell you a brief before going into the debate why he called it a revolution. You see, he was a Marxist person, and in 1930s he was under heavy influence of the era of Russian Revolution, and he started thinking of everything in archaeology in terms of that context of Marxist idea and Russian Revolution. He thought that the basis of the modern civilization is Industrial Revolution, and this Industrial Revolution became possible today because of two other revolutions that have happened way back in the past, which he called as twin revolutions. And what are those twin revolutions? Number one, you have Neolithic Revolution. The second one is Urban Revolution. We study both of them in our syllabus. Can this be called as revolution? Where they were, where they not were, all those things. So we have, these are called as twin revolution. This idea was given by V. Gordon Childe in his book Man Makes Himself in 1936. Now, to understand what he's trying to say, he's trying to give you a unilinear model of cultural progress, cultural evolution of human civilization, where he says that in the back, in the past, you have Paleolithic era. From there, we go to Neolithic. He has completely discarded the use of the term Mesolithic. He does not believe Mesolithic existed at all. According to V. Gordon Child, it is a figment of imagination. There is no such phase called Mesolithic between Paleo and Neo. And then from Neo, you go to Chalcolithic. From Chalco, you go to Bronze. And then you have Iron and other stages. That is what he told us. And he has given this level of cultural evolution which is accompanying every stage. For example, in Paleo, he says man was savage. So savagery, and savage is in good terms, a noble savage kind of thing. And then here you have man as a barbaric. And then you go to Bronze where it becomes civilized. So first cities emerged there. So what happens here, according to him, is a Neolithic revolution. And what happens here, according to him, is urban revolution. And that is what is the model of twin revolution given by V. Gordon Child. It appears very simple, but there are certain assumptions underneath this very funda. And the moment you start peeling the onion and see those assumptions, it becomes easier to appreciate and also critically appraise the idea of Neolithic revolution. So let me give you the brief. The first idea that it is a Marxist concept, so it is firmly based on the idea of progress. Idea of progress. Idea of progress is the idea of human progress that emerged in Enlightenment era. That the story of growth of human civilization is going linearly towards betterment of your life. Gradually, affluence is increasing, prosperity is increasing. It is a unilinear betterment model, and belief that tomorrow will be better than today and past was not as good as it is today. That is why through multiple revolutions, your life improves. The second idea is that the change, he says, for Stone Age to Bronze and Chalco Age, and then for Iron Age, this change is about tools. But the basis he has used to divide Stone Age into Paleo and Neo, that is more than tools. According to him, it is more about economic change. And therefore, he talks about economic change, which is in the Marxist context. Are you able to follow me? Economy changes, so society, polity, everything changes according to superstructure, substructure, typical thing, mode of production. And third thing is that because it is a sudden revolution in his mind, he has discarded the intermediate phase, that is Mesolithic phase. According to V. Gordon Child, Mesolithic phase does not exist, or it is a figment of imagination. You have a sudden transition from a very long Paleolithic era to Neolithic era. That is these are the assumptions that he has given when he termed it revolution in basic sense. But to understand what is the import of Neolithic revolution, which is as good as the features of revolution, let us discuss those things. I have not brought another page on which I had written some notes about the comments, but when I went through your answers, at least 10 of them by morning, I found a few things. Firstly, some of you have very well drawn map of India. When they explain the features of Neolithic revolution, you have drawn the map of India, shown some site. It is a very good thing to do. You have to, but while drawing the map, you don't have to cite all the locations. Handful of them, 3-4 type sites are good enough. If you're doing it, it is good. Please do that. Secondly, when it comes to structure of the answer, you don't have to necessarily separate the features of Neolithic era from the features of Neolithic revolution. That way, you will end up writing the same things or similar things 2 times. What I'm trying to say is that features, let us say introduction ho gaya, then you have features as the first part, then you have, should it be called revolution? Yes, reasons 1, 2, 3. And should it be called revolution? No, reasons 1, 2, 3. Before that, you have intro and then you have conclusion. If that is the structure you have followed, then there is a possibility that in these 2 parts, you have lot of overlap. It may become little bulky because the question is asked in the 2 parts. You may be mechanistically required to go to this structure, this is okay structure. But if you think that you are not able to differentiate part 1 and part 2, you are completely okay and right to merge them into one. The features itself should tell you that they are revolutionary or not. So that is a two-part structure or three-part structure, both of them are completely fine. Whenever you give features, my next comment, along with features, if you are able to cite the sites, that first pottery, Langhnaj, for example, or first a rice you found in Lahore Deva or somewhere. So if you get, or Kunjun, Poldi Hawa, or Mehergarh was the first Neolithic site in Indian subcontinent, if you're giving such kind of examples, it will be very good. So for every feature, if you have one site in your mind, it makes your map preparation also very easy, and also your arguments get substantiated. Hardly a few people have done that. Instead, if you don't do that, or if you can't do that, you just draw a map and show 4 sites, that is also fine. That is also fine. Anyway, come back to the question. We'll discuss first these two things together. Are these the features why it should be called revolution? And then in detail, we'll go for why it should not be called revolution. And in that part, in this last part, I will go beyond your normal textbooks and try to open up more vistas for you. And it will be extremely useful to appreciate the topic and make your answers unique and also profound. It will impress the examiner like nothing. Let me go. Firstly, what is the meaning of revolution? There are two simple parts. One thing is that it should be sudden, fast, or quick. The pace should be there. If it is very long, very slow, very laborious, it by default becomes evolution and not revolution. And second aspect of revolution would be it should lead to radical, fundamental change. As even in V. Gordon Child's book, he himself says that it led to the transformation in all departments of human life. That is the phrase he has used in his book, the transformation in all departments of human life. So not only it is a sudden fundamental transformation, not sudden, sorry, fundamental transformation, sudden is already taken care of. It is also in the all spheres of life, political, social, economic, technological, religious, everything. So if you show it is sudden and quick, it is fundamental in all spheres of life, then you can support the argument that it is a Neolithic revolution. Now, supporting this, you can write only one argument, one line, which is given in a book by Irfan Habib. Tulika publication is publishing now the People's History of India long series. Not all books have become public, but in the prehistory they have published their books. Irfan Habib is the general editor of the series, and he has given a very nice statement. He says that before the Neolithic phase, in the earlier 30,000 years, whatever changes happened, compared to that, the changes happened in the 3,000 years of this era are much more fundamental. So 30,000 compared to 3,000, so therefore it is relatively quite sudden. That is what the argument is given by the Marxist historians. It is a sudden revolution. And when you say it is fundamental change in the all departments of human life, you are actually trying to say that it is creating a threshold for urban life. Had there urban life or civilization, in short. Had there been no Neolithic revolution, there would not have been urban revolution. So the major contribution of Neolithic revolution is to create food surplus, which ultimately leads to the cities. That is the major contribution. Now we have to see what are all the features one by one. I have seen in a lot of copies, some of you have started with either pottery, some of you have started with stone tools becoming more polished and quite more abundantly available. These are fine things, but these are not the fundamental aspects. What happened to the toolkit of human culture at that time? That should not be the point with which you start the answer. When you justify revolution, the basic point is food surplus, domestication, rest all things, why it became possible, what were the consequences, they come in that domain. But basic thing, the very first point is Neolithic revolution is about agricultural revolution, food surplus, because Neolithic Revolution is also known as agricultural revolution, right? So the first thing is domestication. There are funny stories around it, a lot of them. We don't need to go the process, but what happened because of domestication? It could be wheat, it could be rice, barley, potato, maize, and a few more. And in the case of animals, it could be dog. I think the first animal domesticated was dog. Am I right? And after dog, you have a lot of them. So what were the consequences? You have firstly greater food supply, and greater food supply goes to increasing population. That is the first point. What happens afterwards? The second aspect, which I have not seen so far in any of the answer, but which is as important as greater food supply, is control over environment. It is the very basic thing. The progress of human civilization is the progress of humans understanding and therefore being able to control the nature more and more. And agriculture revolution is the major first step towards that. You are able to tame the nature, and therefore from now onwards humans are not dependent on the mercy of nature. They have their own food supply. They have even the capacity to alter the landscape in which they live. For the first time you start looking at the landscape of the earth the way it looks today. Before that, for millions of years, earth looked differently. So having ability to alter the landscape, taming the nature, control over environment is as important a point conceptually as greater food supply. And this became possible due to domestication. So these are the 2 points. Then you go for second point, permanent settlement, because agriculture requires you to have permanent settlements. What does it mean? What does it entail? First of all, it makes the life in a community possible. You are no more a banned society. You can have settled communities who are stable communities. So community life becomes possible. Then what is else? You have the creation of the first villages. The first farmers create first villages. So you have something called as self-sufficient village economy that emerges in this era, self-sufficient village economy. And then it creates the basis of urban revolution in later era. So the word domestication that we have used here, that we generally say that humans have domesticated plants, humans have domesticated animals, but actually it has happened the other way around. The word domestic has come from home in Latin. So who is living in homes now? Humans. So it is humans who are domesticated. So anyway, they have third point. The third point is regarding sedentary life. The moment you have sedentary life, it has again far-reaching consequences, especially in the domain of material culture. So changes in material culture is next important point. Material culture, what are the changes? Firstly, you have now lot of paraphernalia that you need to subserve your needs. For example, pottery. Apart from that, you have even houses which come up of different shapes and sizes. You have textile. You even have, for the first time, luxury to experiment with metals. So the emergence of metallurgical science would become possible only because you had luxury and time and sedentary life. So it has altered the material culture completely. Humans even created a lot of secondary products which did not exist in nature as they are, like flax, like wool. We took some raw material and we started changing them to a far greater extent than we did in the earlier life. It led to the better and rational appreciation of the characteristic of nature. But again, it will go back to the same point, that is control over nature. You have fourth point, which is emergence of complex social relationships. Complex social relationships. And here you have 3-4 important points. Firstly, because of variety of crafts which came into existence due to complex material culture, you have craft specialization of people. Not everybody is doing the same thing. Then you also start having division of labor. Apart from that, you have the possibility of emergence of state. The state could emerge because some people need not have to create their own food. So surplus led to inequality and stratification. How do you know there was stratification in society? Look at the different houses. Some houses are bigger than other houses. Look at the grave goods. Some grave goods are more luxurious than other grave goods. Look at the granaries. Some people control the granaries, others don't. So these various examples tell us, archaeological, material, cultural examples, that there was social inequality, and social inequality becomes the prerequisite of emergence of state. If everybody is equal, there can't be state. So ultimately, the rise of state became possible, not in this very era, but in long term, it became possible. In this era, we see a political change. We have emergence of chiefdoms. So tribal society is now gone. You have emergence of chiefdoms, which later on gradually go into full-fledged state over a few centuries. And then you also have gender role. Last point over here would be gender role. There are arguments by many archaeologists, anthropologists, ethno-anthropologists, historians, that the females contributed far more than the males in such kind of social change. For example, spinning or weaving, pottery, all these inventions were possibly made by female than male. But nonetheless, we don't need to go into all this complexity of social change. We have this argument of complex social change. The last point is about culture and religion. The fifth point. Fifth, right? 4 and 5th, yes. Fifth point is about culture and religion. Because you have now more leisure time, you have time for art, craft, you have time for engravings, time for music, you also have time for community feasts, you have time for rituals. So you have necessity of protecting your crop. For that, you have to pray to some god, like elements of nature. They began to be worshipped. Worship of elements of nature. Even the emergence of female deity, that is fertility cult, is connected with beginning of the Neolithic era. So fertility cult or the female deities. You see in excavation also, you find for the first time the sculptures of figurines of female goddesses. So all these things in social religious aspect are the consequences of Neolithic Revolution. That these are the so what would be the comment on this type of changes? That there was definitely a profound change, you can write this line down, that altered the relationship between man and nature and also man and man. That is the transformation that happened in agricultural era or beginning of the agriculture. And therefore, it came to the threshold of civilization. Therefore, it is a fundamental change and thus it is a revolution. That is the first half of the answer. You don't need to write all these points. You can cut them into half, mention one point in each and go ahead. It can very easily be done in 100 to 120 words. Not a problem. So you have all these changes. Now comes the counter side. The glorification of agricultural revolution as revolution has led to a mental model where we have a division of prehistory into two parts. One is the history before agriculture, in which a man was hunter and gatherer. And one is the history after the beginning of agriculture, in which man is an agriculturalist. And these two are different era. The earlier era of hunter-gatherer is quite a long span, and later era is little shorter. But such kind of unilinear, binary, and also one-directional change is a romantic mental model which is questionable. life is not divided into such two halves, first half like this and second half like that. It has not happened that way. So how do you start questioning them? There are multiple, there are 5 major axes of questioning whether this should be called as revolution or not. Let us see the other half. The first point, I will discuss 5 points to question was this a Neolithic revolution or not. The first part is quite theoretical, the Marxist sense, because the author or the person who gave the idea of this twin revolution himself was a Marxist. So we have to talk in the context of the Marxist sense of revolution. This point, if you don't include in the answer, it is completely okay. You are not necessarily required to go into this theoretical aspect, but if you do, it is fine. So in Marxist sense, revolution is something that occurs not only sudden, not only fundamental, but also to resolve some dichotomy in society. For example, you have initially the slave society of masters and slaves. It's a binary. There is some kind of conflict. To resolve the conflict comes one revolution, social change. Then you have in the medieval time feudal and peasants. Again, it's a binary. To resolve that, you have industrial revolution. You have so such kind of dichotomies go on in Marxist sense. This revolution is not to resolve any such inherent contradiction that pre-existed in society. Rather, it appears as if it happened in a consensualist way. Everybody benefited. Some people benefited more, some people benefited less, but it benefited everybody to some extent. So in that Marxist sense, it is not a revolution. That is first. But this argument is quite theoretical. If you don't use it in the answer, it is completely perfectly well. Now comes the second point. Was it a sudden revolution? Because we have discussed the two aspects, sudden and fundamental change. Let us discuss the first. Was it a sudden revolution? What do you think? You see, the foragers, the hunter-gatherers, foragers knew the secrets of life, of plants and animals well before the beginning of agriculture, because their very existence depended on their intimate knowledge of plants and animals. So we cannot say that with this revolution only, suddenly the humankind became aware of plants and animals. Rather, the change was quite gradual. And there was continuity between paleo to neo even till today. So it is neither sudden or abrupt or complete change. How do you know? For example, take pottery. Now, pottery emerges in the late Pleistocene era. Already in Mesolithic, you have pottery. So material culture, if you see, pottery is there already. Then you can go for other aspects. The experiments with the plants seem to have begun quite before 10,000 BCE, when the Neolithic Revolution is supposed to have started. 10,000, 9,000 BCE is the era in which we say Neolithic began. But hundreds and thousands of years before that, we have the beginning of experimentation with plants. 20,000 years before BCE, then 10,000 years. So that is there. The settled life plants experiment. So these experiments that were carried did not reach the fruition suddenly. The experiments took time to mature. Then settled life. Even the settled life did not begin with Neolithic. Whatever Gordon Child may say that with farming only came the villages, it is not true. We have the beginning of settled life in many places quite before the beginning of agriculture. That is why the term called Mesolithic. The Mesolithic term is about, Mesolithic has some features of Paleo and some features of Neo already. Then you have even the long distance trade. The long distance trade, for example, the very famous example of seashells. Seashells are exchanged over long trade networks. So even long distance trade is not the outcome of Neolithic. It was there even before. Even Mupinder Singh talks about Chalcedony or Chalcedony, which came from Deccan to north in Mesolithic era. Right? So you have those things. So, and even hunting, you see, hunting requires of, especially when you have a big game, not small animals like khargosh. When you have big game, it requires coordination. It requires some rituals, social bonding, skill set. So that also tells that they have social coordination of relatively high order even before the beginning of settled village community life. So all these things tell us that it was gradual, not sudden. There is second argument that look at the entire span of domestication. If you look at the first plant or animal that was domesticated, let us say 10,000 years ago, the process continued till the 4th millennium BCE, 3,500 years ago. It was a long span of 6,500 in which we domesticated all the major plants and animals that we use today. So it is a long phase. It is not sudden. That is the second. So first, this is the first argument, that material social culture gradually evolved. Second argument, even the process of domestication was spread over thousands of years. And third argument, the advent of Neolithic era, advent of agriculture does not mean end of hunting gathering. It also continued side by side. Even today it continues. That is why I wrote today. Rather, as an archaeologist, when you go to excavation, how do you know which site is which? Because in every site, at many level, at even one level, you find multiple remains. So we can only say about a site. Let us say there is a site. I find variety of subsistence pattern as we see in Harappa also. Some food come from the agriculture. Some food comes from domesticated animals. Some food comes from fishing. Some food comes from the hunting of wild animals. Everything happens even today. So how do you say at which point of time that layer in the stratigraphy has become Neolithic? The change might not happen sudden. Today, the community is hunting gathering, which has 100% dependence on wild food. And then after a few centuries, let us say, presumably it is completely dependent on domesticated food. But the transition might not happen overnight. Initially, a few people would be involved in agriculture. Then after some decades, few more in agriculture. So at what point of time in your stratigraphy you will say now this site has become Neolithic? The archaeological convention is that when more than 50% of the food supply comes from domestication, then we say the site has converted into Neolithic. In itself, it tells us that it is not an abrupt transition. These things coexist for a long time. So for these three reasons, one and the two I told you verbally or orally, we have this sudden argument wala thing. So this second argument, it is here that most of you can end your answer very well, no problem. In the first half you discuss it was revolution for these 5-6 reasons. In second half you say, okay, the process was quite sudden, not quite sudden, quite slow, and these are the three reasons. Therefore, it can better be termed as evolution. It can better, but you have to still agree in that case the changes were definitely fundamental, but quite slow and laborious. So it should better be termed as evolution and not revolution. It makes a perfect and complete answer, and you can end your answer there. That is fine. But for the discussion purpose, for our understanding, I will go 2-3 points beyond that now. And if you are able to add these 2-3 points somehow, either in conclusion or if you are able to construct your answer differently, then your answer will become much better than this. And the examiner will be impressed. What are those points? The first, so one is done, second is done. I will go to the third point now. See, in this Marxist idea of progress, you have something called as unilinear change. Was it a unilinear change? From hunting gathering to agro-pastoralism? You see, there were a long series of experiments in different parts of the world. Sometimes they succeeded, sometimes they did not. Quite a lot of time you also see that a community matures into pottery making, community matures into agriculture, then it finds it is not so useful, it goes back to the earlier type of life. It discards agriculture. So change is not, it is very accidental, it is very complicated, it is not unilinear. Globally, the direction of change may be towards agriculture, but if you go locally, everywhere, it is very to and fro, to and fro. In the long duration, it is a unilinear change, but locally and in contemporary era, it is not unilinear. And then there are diversity of life forms. Even after you enter Neolithic era, you continue. Some villages have agriculture. Some people go for mix of agricultural food and wild food. More importantly, not all domestication was of only plants. A lot of it happened for animals also. And there are many communities which chose domestication of animals over domestication of plants, and they did not become agriculturalists. Rather, they became pastoralists. And when you are pastoral, you are taking care of a herd of sheep. Can you have a settled life? You can't. You need a land for foraging or pasture land. You have to go seasonally, top, bottom to top, or whatever, linearly. So migrations are ingrained in the pastoralist life. You are nomadic. So there are different kind of models that also emerged during this Neolithic change, and it did not lead to settled village life and all this state creation. So even within Neolithic era, the change is not unilinear. There are multiple patterns of life that have emerged, right? So you should question that. Now, fourth argument. If you go by that concept of revolution which V. Gordon Childe has given, what he's trying to say actually? He's trying to tell you that it was a conquest of man over nature, conquest of technology and mind and economy of man to tame the nature and environment. So he presumes some kind of conflict between man and nature, and man is gradually emerging as successful and conqueror of nature. Is it true? Is it the conquest of only technology of man, of tools or domestication? The factors are not only scientific, which led to such kind of change. For example, I'll give you some example. The victory of technology that led to such transformation? Take one example of domestication of dog, or even firing of a wheel-turned pottery. Your pottery turned on wheel and then you fire it. Making a dog domesticated or firing a wheel-turned pottery requires a skill set that is not only about your hand, it takes your entire body. And you are biologically not automatically evolved to perform those functions. So more than technology, this thing is also about entire human skill set emerging. They have a term, although this term I will just give you for additional reading. Don't worry about it. It is called as metaplasticity. You can Google it later on. But more than metaplasticity, I want to give you some more reasons why it was not a victory necessarily always of technology over environment. Take an example of food supply or food surplus. Upinder Singh tells about that in her book, that food surplus is not only a technological achievement, but a social thing. You have taboos, you have exchange of food, you have gift giving, you have trade, you have religion. All these things come into being which lead to food surplus, not only technology. So to look at it as the victory of technology in the conquest of nature is not true. That is the second argument. The third argument is about, it is not only about technology or science, it is also about magic, ritual and religion. In many cultures, it is found that why do people initially cook food? Cooking may be boiling, it could be, apart from boiling, it could be steaming, even fermentation, for example. People go for cooking for ritual purposes, for religious purposes, for magic purposes, and not only so that they can eat something which is culturally acceptable. So the factors that drove the change is not only technology, but also emerging religion and magic. So it doesn't fit into that Marxist model. Are you able to follow me? So that is my third reason. I have fourth reason also. The fourth reason is about animal domestication. When V. Gordon Childe would say that animals are domesticated, उसका आविर्भाव ऐसे होगा, he would have such an imposition that as if a man has now a better, dominant, more powerful controlling situation over the animals. But was it so always? We have many examples which are now proven with ethno-archaeology and other things, that the relationship between, let us say, a herd of sheep and man was not of unilinear dominance, it was of mutual coexistence. Humans provided security and protection to the herds, and in return, the herds provided food to humans. It is a mutual relationship, and it was understood to be such by the man back then in some cases. So, what we have is not conquest of nature, you have harmony with nature. Harmony with nature, and not necessarily conquest. So, all these things, the four reasons I gave you, they question the paradigm of a typical revolution, Neolithic Revolution, in which it is said that it was conquest of technology over nature. It may not be. Are you able to follow me? These are the four. And the fifth question, the last question, which is I found personally very interesting, is that, see, transition towards food production happened everywhere in the world. Not in one place, in every continent. It may have happened independently also. But the reason that it happened is not enough. Listen carefully. The reason that it happened everywhere is not enough to prove that the change was for good. Was it a good change or a bad change? Did we benefit or we lose out? So here we start questioning the idea of progress. This idea of progress is very much the foundational idea that came out of Enlightenment, the product of which was Marxist idea, that with every revolution, your life is becoming better and better and better. We are in a better situation today than we were 2000 years ago. How do we know that? Rather, all the changes that have happened that we saw in the revolution, I can now show one by one, they were for the worse. उससे हमारा घाटा अधिक हुआ, फायदा कम हुआ. Can you imagine that? Take, for example, labor. It was imagined that a human, because he has some agricultural field, he has to sit and just take the crop and eat. And therefore, the amount of efforts you had to put into big game and hunting would be much more than in agriculture. It is statistically, empirically incorrect. We know that a hunter and gatherer would spend around 20 hours per week, around 20 hours per week in catching food. But an agriculturalist, a peasant, would give around 40 hours per week in agriculture. So your labor almost doubled. कहाँ आराम मिला आपको? लाइफ अच्छी हुई? मजदूरी करो. The second point is about starvation. Now, because you are dependent on your field for, let us say, maize or rice, the field has to be protected. It has to give you yield every year. What if there is no monsoon some year? Rain changes its mood. What is the locust attack comes? Once you store all the food in the granary for such kind of future scarcity, the granary can be attacked by pests and rodents. Right? So there is no guarantee that you are putting in labor today a lot so that you have better tomorrow. It is not. It's still, you are still at the mercy of nature, even after that. And possibility of starvation increases because you are dependent on single food supply. The third reason, disease. If the settled human life in villages began, along with that, hygiene did not begin at the same time. You are now rather more amenable or more exposed to epidemics. Deaths increased afterwards. Not only diseases, look at the diet. As a hunter, forager, gatherer, you would have diversity of berries and leaves and fruits to eat. You get natural supply of varied nutrition, varied minerals, vitamins, everything. But once you you become dependent on sole, maize or rice or wheat, there is no such nutritional diversity. Politics comes not only about big people, about the adults. Look at the children. In the settled agricultural life, the children are weaned off the mother's breast milk as early as possible, maybe at the 6 months or 1 year, compared to 2-3 years in the earlier past, in the hunting gathering era, and then children go towards eating porridges of rice. So their body immunity is not as strong as it was earlier, and they die very easily. 1 in 3 children in agricultural life died before they reached the age of 20. So child mortality also increased once you start agricultural life. So you have labor, you have starvation, you have diet problem, diseases, mortality. Not only that, you see, once you look at the skeletons that we find from all this era, it becomes quite apparent that the average height of human skeleton decreased by 2 to 4 inches after the beginning of agriculture because of the problem of diet and lifestyle. It is only in the 20th century, with the welfare state emerging and post-industrial revolution, that all these things were again come back, and the average height of human skeleton have gone back to the pre-Neolithic Revolution era. Now, for the first time, after last 12,000 years, we get the same quality of nutrition after 12,000 years. And it's not only about individuals. Look at the society. There is increased violence in the society because you have importance of land as property. You have stored grain. Somebody could come and, as a thief, he would steal it away. There is a state that is emerging in which people who don't produce their own food, they work and feed off people who produce the food. They have inequality, and the king emerges. He starts putting taxation, rules and regulation of life. Life was never so with freedom and independence as it was in the pre-agricultural revolution. Now you are bound. Violence also increases, not only over property, but between human and animals. In the hunting life, you have hunger. You go and kill one game, you eat it. Violence is over from your side. Sometimes you get killed, that's all. But now in the agricultural era, you cultivate species only to kill them. Violence increased. Not only that, you have cattle, and you have to tame them. You have to control their natural urges, natural sexuality, and all those things so that they can be used for your labor. That kind of violence also increased. Was it a good picture of human life? We have even one thought that says that humans did not domesticate, for example, wheat or other grains. It is those grains who have domesticated humans. Humans are laboring for them. The landmass on where the wheat is grown across the world has increased. Yuval Noah Harari's book talks about it. The Sapiens, he has given this idea. I don't know who is the original scholar behind the idea. I read that idea in his book for the first time, that instead of humans domesticating plants, it is those plants that have domesticated humans. And if you go by a scientific definition of domestication, it involves some genetic change. And once agricultural change happened, there has been observed some genetic change in human body. And now you are toiling for them. And their presence across the world, their population across the world has increased. Wheat was never so popular and numerous on the back of the earth as it is today. But anyway, that argument is different. That is not useful for us. The conclusion that I want to tell you is that agricultural revolution may have helped in the evolutionary sense for species to multiply, but it came at the cost of individual suffering. So human individually suffered, but humanity as a species prospered because of Neolithic Revolution. So even if you don't go into these three arguments, in your answer it is completely fine. But the last line I just spoke, that evolutionary success but individual suffering, that you can just write in the conclusion, that itself would entail that you know that there is idea of progress that is being questioned. That is good enough. Otherwise, a normal answer would look revolution, 1, 2, 3 things, and just it was not sudden, it was gradual, yet fundamental, so evolution. That is a fine answer. You will get average marks. But to go beyond average, you can add some of these dimensions as possible by you. Okay? So, thank you.